Begin in just a moment. All right. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Legislative Affairs Committee. I now call this meeting to order. Please be advised that FATV is conducting audio and video recording for public broadcast. I ask that anyone in the audience who is recording to please identify yourself for the record now by standing and stating your name and city of residence. Seeing none, I ask that all electronic devices be placed into silent mode, please. All right. And Councillor Van Hazinga, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Members in attendance tonight, we have Councillor Van Hazinga, Councillor Krucher, and Councillor Cruz, and myself, President Zarella, chairing. Let's see. We have, for public comment, we have 3 people who are registered to speak on Zoom. I only see 1 currently in attendance online, but Ms. Perez, if you want to address the council for not more than 2 minutes, your mic is now open. It's muted on your side, though. Ms. Perez? All right, we'll check back with you after I've asked the in-person audience. All right, if anyone in attendance would like to speak, not including those who will be presenting, please approach the center podium, identify yourself by name and city of residence, and then you may speak for not more than 2 minutes.
Well, I didn't realize it was open comment, so I don't have anything prepared. But I'm here to speak on the behalf of Board of Health to be a voting position versus an appointed position. Seeing how they handled the COVID-19 pandemic with the schools, it's very important that us parents have a say over anybody that rules and makes decisions over our schools. Secondly, also making decisions and ruling over all the decisions on the apartments and the restaurants and everything. It would be nice to have accountability. So I am here to say I am in favor of the Board of Health becoming an appointed, voting position versus appointed position.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, did we get your name for the record?
Jessica Jacobson?
Yes, thank you. Good to finally meet you, Ms. Jacobson.
Yep.
Good evening. My name is Jean Robbie. I live here in Fitchburg. I am for voting in our Board of Health as we need some new blood here. We need somebody new to represent. We need change. We need to be brought forward to the times of today, not yesterday. The board that we currently have is kind of dormant. I think we need somebody who will represent us, the people, who will represent you, the people, grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, as well as the children. After living through what we've just lived through, and no questions asked, and none of us as parents were able to even talk or say anything or have a say, I think our voices need to be heard by voting them in, as most of the towns here in Massachusetts do. So we're kind of behind in times right now. It's time to get caught up, don't you think? I'm in favor of voting them in. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jason Lazat. I live in the city all my life out in West Fitchburg, Ward 3. Started out as a paramedic in the city, serving all the citizens when I was 18. Registered nurse, and I was looking and I saw the item on the agenda online when I was searching the city's website yesterday, and it caught my attention from watching the meetings online and coming in, and I support what the counselor is doing, and I agree with what the last speaker just said. There needs to be some change. Kind of disappointed in what has been done over the past with the current Board of Health that represents us. There are a lot of medical professionals that are willing to step up and serve the city, the residents, the people that come through our great city. Even before this petition came, or however it's going to proceed, I'm not sure how that is, but personally, I have submitted a letter to the mayor's office in the past, recently, requesting possible appointment to the committee. I haven't heard anything yet, but there are plenty of medical professionals that live in a city that would love to serve on the board. And if it turns into something where they're voted, there's people that will put the effort to go that route. So I'm just here to support everybody. Thank you.
Any further public comment at this time? Last call. All right, Ms. Perez online, can you hear us now? Do you wish to make any comment? This is the last opportunity. Oh. All right, fair enough. And I was told there were 2 other people who had registered. I do not see them in the Zoom chat, so we're just going to have to move on. All right, we have the single item on our agenda tonight, 255-22, Councillor Marcus DiNatale on behalf of Fitchburg resident Jacqueline Wetchy to change the method by which the members of the Board of Health are chosen from appointive to elective. Members would serve 4-year terms and be chosen by the people of Fitchburg via the November municipal election ballot on odd-numbered years. Signature requirements for ballot placement would be 50 certified signatures from Fitchburg registered voters across all wards and precincts. If there are more than double the number of candidates, more than 6 for the number of seats, 3 seats, a preliminary election will be held on a date subject to City Council approval. Councillor DiNatale and Ms. Wetchy.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Legislative Affairs Committee. My name is Marcus DiNatale. I am here as the petition sponsor on behalf of Ms. Weechie, Fitchburg resident. When this was brought before me by Ms. Weechie, I thought that my first instinct thought was that it certainly warranted a discussion and a public hearing or 2, or however long the process will take. I understand in our discussions that this may require a substantive change involving the city charter. Whether it will or it won't, I still believe that it warrants discussion and feedback. And from where I sit, the filing this, sponsoring this, for me, is not a direct action against whatever the board has done in the past, but more along the lines of this is something that is not without precedent in the state of Massachusetts. There are well over 100 communities in this Commonwealth that do elect their Board of Health members. And I just want to caution anyone who would cast this aside as a ridiculous idea. Not only the precedent of other communities, many other communities doing this, and many do not. They do what we do right now, is just the 2 arguments that I have heard principally from constituents about this proposal is first, how do we trust the voters of this city to select qualified candidates for the position of Board of Health? And my counter to that is, well, I have faith in the voting electorate that they are objective enough and intelligent enough to ascertain who is qualified for the position of Board of Health and who is not, based off their qualifications, their background, debates, positions that they have. So I don't believe that that's an argument that holds a lot of merit. The second argument that has been leveled to me is, interest. Are you going to find people qualified to run for these positions? Again, that's a thought that it's jumping ahead of what is trying to be accomplished here. I don't believe that a decision should be made on this based on what could be the case in a future election about interest or not. We've never done this before, so there's no way to know if there wouldn't be any interest or not. I know of some people who have stated they would be interested. It's up to the voters to decide who is qualified and who is not for these positions, as it is for our own, as it is for mayor, as it is for school committee. And I just believe, in my own opinion, that those two arguments don't hold a lot of weight as to why this shouldn't be entertained. What I will say is I asked the committee to give this its fair hearing, give consideration to it, and weigh the pros and cons, and I hope that you will give it its fair hearing and make a determination or what needs to happen going forward if this were to be moved forward. But I just wanted to make those statements about historical precedent with other communities in this Commonwealth and those two principal arguments that I've heard about why it wouldn't be a good idea. I am not necessarily saying that it's a good idea or not to change course, but it certainly isn't an idea that should be cast aside and not discussed and thoroughly reviewed. I think it has merit in many instances, and with that, I would turn it over to Ms. Weechie if she had any comments.
Yes, thank you. I also know of multiple people, Fitchburg residents, who've indicated they would be willing to serve on the Board of Health. I haven't asked them any litmus test questions, what is your policy on COVID or anything else. I've just spoken with them about their qualifications, and they are well qualified. I also, speaking to Councillor Di Natale's point of we're not competent to elect our Board of Health, vehemently disagree with that. If we as ordinary people are allowed to sit on juries and decide if people live or die or they're incarcerated the rest of their life, surely we can make decisions such as this, which is not as consequential. And I did prepare a 2-minute comment, because I thought I'd be giving public comment. You hear many matters, but not often ones that allow you to expand democracy in the city. This petition does that. The electoral process will allow us to vet board members and select individuals based not just on professional qualifications, but also high ethical standards. There's currently an unresolved ethical situation with one of our board members. It's been going on since June and is still not resolved, and that's of concern to many of us. Every attempt to give added power to the people in this country has faced opposition. In the closest parallel I could find to this petition, the anti-federalists opposed the direct election of U.S. senators, and it wasn't until the 17th Amendment was ratified in 1913 that we could vote for them. Before that, state legislators picked them. If today you were to suggest that Beacon Hill should choose our senators for us, people will be horrified, and rightly so. Some city councilors on a certain side of the aisle expressed concern to me that the voters might not elect the right kind of people to the Board of Health. So to them I say consider. Massachusetts senators elected by the people include one so beloved that when he became president, the halcyon glow of Camelot extended thousands of miles away to Alberta, Canada, where I was named after his wife. Others elevated to national stature include the Lion of the Senate, Ted Kennedy, Paul Tsongas, and John Kerry. As part of the great arc of history, ordinary people in our state elected notable individuals, unlikely to ever have been chosen in the proverbial smoke-filled back rooms of the State House. People like Edward Brooke, who was black, and Elizabeth Warren, who's a woman, and someone I tried to emulate by being persistent. You can trust the people to elect our Board of Health. Democracy in our state has a good track record. Please don't deny us the right to vote because changing the status quo is inconvenient.
Thank you very much. I believe the solicitor may have some remarks he'd like to make on this, or would you prefer to hold those for?
Why don't I hold for listen to public comment?
All right. Well, we have had public comment.
Okay, I apologize for being late.
All right, in that case, councilors, any questions, comments?
I'll speak. The Board of Public Health has an important job. It's to keep us safe. And that involves a lot of things. It involves preventing the spread of communicable diseases, preventing the spread of environmental contamination, responding to public health emergencies, among many other responsibilities. But overall, their goal and their responsibility is to keep us safe. And to do so, they have to rely on the guidance of public health agencies, such as the CDC, the Surgeon General, the EPA. There are a lot of regulations, like septic regulations, that are the responsibility of the Board of Health to set and enforce. And those decisions have to be made based on the best guidance possible to keep us safe. They should not be political decisions. And I strongly believe that the Board of Health should not be elected, because these decisions should be made on the best information and guidance available. It shouldn't be based on what will get me elected or what will get me unelected in November. And I think when public safety and public health is at stake, we need to be very careful about things like this. And I do not think this is a good idea, and I strongly oppose this position.
Councilor Kruger?
Although I understand what my fellow councilor is saying, it should not be just a carte blanche ability to be able to control the public. That's what the problem is that they have no repercussions for their actions. And I understand what you're saying is that they have to take appropriate actions. Okay, I agree. They have to take appropriate actions. But should they be accountable for those actions? They should be, especially when the public comes out and says, we don't want these masks anymore. We don't want these mandates anymore. And I understand where you're coming from. We have to protect the public, but it should be an elected position. There's so many towns and cities that do have an elected Board of Health. I don't think it is wrong to at least discuss the possibility. We already have medical personnel, one present here today, a fellow ward resident, thank you for coming. They came down to say, you know what? Why should it be appointed? Why can't I have the ability to put my name in? He's a nurse, he's a paramedic. He has medical experience. Should that be added as a requirement? Maybe. I don't know if we could do that. That'd be something that we would turn to the city solicitor to explain. Can we put some sort of a medical degree in order to be able to be eligible to run for this position? I don't think that's unreasonable. I think we should discuss it further. I just don't think that we should just end it here.
Councilor Cruz, did you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you. First, I want to thank everybody for coming. It's encouraging to see you all getting involved, and I appreciate it. I sincerely do. I see both sides of this coin as well, and I'm not going to outright dismiss it. And my concern, much like Councillor Van Hazinga, is that this becomes a politicized thing now, and health should not be politicized. We do have things in place to prevent the wrong people from getting appointed by our mayor, by the administration. This council is one of those things. I did some research as to other communities and places doing this. I just want to share one medical study from the National Library of Medicine. Although there is a growing trend to publicly elect members of healthcare boards through the desire to make more accountable to the public, there is no evidence that public elections will accomplish this. There are a number of mechanisms already in place to ensure accountability, and appointing trustees makes it more likely that only properly qualified trustees will hold board positions. But I agree that it's giving you more democracy. So honestly, I'm quite torn. I wonder if there are other things that we can put in place. Term limits on some of our Board of Health would be something we can consider. We do that for a number of our committees and councils already to ensure that there is change, and we do have new leadership. and I'm wondering if that's something to consider as well. We do have our solicitor here. He can speak more about that. Public health should not be politicized. It should not be. We're here because of masks, right? Like, that's why we're here.
Okay, guys. We're not actually taking any further public comment.
I yield the floor for now.
Ma'am, we're not taking any further public comment. Councilor Cruz, you
I
can
yield the
proceed.
floor for now.
All right. Go right ahead.
So I think what we're talking about is trying to change the charter. And, we had discussed it, we've been working on it. And it's kind of a confusing thing because our charter actually was adopted back in 2015 by
1915.
1915, thank you. By a different format than what's currently conceptualized in our Massachusetts Constitution and the Charter Adoption Statute as well. So it is a kind of such an oddity that we're looking at how you would actually change it. And Attorney Ciota, one of my mentors as a city solicitor, had written a letter back in 91, saying that we would have to go through the formal adoption process. And when I first read that letter, I thought to myself, well, this can't possibly be right because we already have adopted a charter. So as I looked into it, I understand what he's saying. What he's saying is that the statute that allows us to amend a charter in the Massachusetts contemplates that the charter was adopted by that statute. And the Massachusetts constitutional provision that talks about amending charters under that provision contemplates charters are being adopted under home rule petition or under the home rule amendment to our Constitution, which was only adopted in 1965.
I believe so, yes. The 60s anyway.
60s. So our charter even predates that. So that goes back to either establishing the adoption of a charter under the statute and under the constitutional provision, or requires us to do a petition, a special legislation act, which has its own challenges too. So it's going to be difficult to get through all these different hurdles, not to say that it would be impossible if that's what we decided that we wanted to do. And shortly, and I know that many of us have been waiting for it, there's going to be a memorandum that explains the complete process. I think the important thing to say, at least tonight, is that we are going to use that process. The initiation of the process could be the signing of a petition. And once that petition gets verified with the certain number of signatures that are required, the language in that petition is almost unchangeable, and it's going to go through the whole process. So if we want to go down this route, we have to make sure that we have a very clear and well-worded petition so that when the process continues along, we have what we want in the beginning. So it's very challenging, and there's a number of pitfalls in the process. So with that being said, we took a look at whether or not we even needed to adopt a charter amendment to accomplish the change in the Board of Health. I would have to stretch my bounds of credulity to say that we could stitch together three different provisions and three different, one in the statute and two in one in the charter and one in the prior charter, to say maybe we can get around having to do a full charter amendment. So I don't think that we're going to be able to do it. We would have to actually change our charter. So when we look at other cities and towns, to us as people, we look at our city and we look at maybe Leominster, we look at a Gardner, or we look at Lowell, and we say, geez, they're just cities just like our city, so why can't we organize our government the same way that they've done it? And the reason is because there were different off-the-shelf plans for government. We have, in our city, a Plan B government. And so that requires certain things, and that has a certain type of language in our charter that maybe prevents us from doing something that either a Plan A or a Plan C city can do. So that gets confusing, and then you add in this additional layer on the time frame of when our charter was adopted. 1915. That creates another issue. And that's kind of what's been holding up the analysis as to exactly how a citizen's petition would actually go forward. So, but we're imminently going to complete that packet, hopefully, for people to utilize it.
And it will be, when it is completed, it will be on file with the city clerk and available to anyone seeking to file a petition. It will be essentially a guide. Thank you very much. I would like to second the fact that this has turned out to be a very complex legal issue. I think I probably did more legal research on this than on any of the cases I handled this past month. There are a lot of towns in Massachusetts that have elected boards, but that's the thing. They're mostly towns and very small cities operating under a Plan D or Plan E structure, in reference to what the solicitor was just talking about. And what that means is they don't have an independent executive. They don't have a mayor. They have, some of them have an officer who is referred to as the mayor but is actually elected by the city council or by the board of selectmen or whatever they have. And some of them have none at all. They just have a hired town manager who performs the day-to-day operations of the mayor but has none of the executive authority. So the reason that those cities and towns have elected boards of health is because they have no appointing authority. They have no one constituted to pick someone and send them to the legislature to confirm them. Nearly every Plan A, B, and C city in the Commonwealth, and nearly every city that has even half our population, has an appointed Board of Health. That said, I'm going to get myself in some hot water here, which I'm no stranger to, and I'm going to say that democracy per se is not always a good thing. And that's not something that I'm coming up with. That's something our founders and framers believed as well, which is why we have elected representatives and why we have multiple layers and safeguards in government, because they believed that having government run by the whims of whatever majority happens to exist at a single point in time was a dangerous thing. And I would tend to agree. I think, in fact, that the COVID pandemic was a perfect example of that, in that, now I'm not insinuating anything about anyone sitting here in the audience, but we saw a lot of people across the country who were convinced that they were getting microchips from the vaccine, or that the vaccine would make them magnetic, or that it was going to kill them, or that it was population control. And some of these people had medical degrees. Some of the people you can look up on YouTube promoting these quack theories have medical degrees. A medical degree is no guarantee that someone is actually a competent physician. It simply means they graduated med school and got licensed once upon a time. There will be no further public comment, and certainly no personal criticism, and certainly no personal criticism of individuals at this meeting. Now, the fact is, yes, voters are intelligent. Yes, voters can be trusted with a lot of decisions. But they aren't necessarily competent to make decisions that require a lot of domain-specific knowledge. There are some things that you just can't know by going on Google. It's not possible. You wouldn't crowdsource your legal representation. You wouldn't, ask for a public vote on what medicine to take for a given condition. You would go to someone who's an expert. Now, I've learned since coming on the council, one of the biggest surprises to me coming in my first years was how much information is readily available to government that is not practically available to the general public, not because it's being hidden or anything, but because once I got the title of counselor, I could call up public officials in other places around the state or whatever and get a person on the line a lot faster and a lot quicker and get information that they might not have been willing to readily divulge to the general public. So when I'm vetting someone who the mayor has put forward as a nominee, not due to anything special about me, but due solely to my office, I have the ability to get a lot more information about that person than the typical person is going to be able to find out. That is why we have some positions appointed rather than elected, because sometimes you just need that additional access to find out what you need to know. Further, I've served on one of our other boards in the city. Before I was a counselor, I was on the zoning board. And I can tell you that given the time commitments and the thankless nature of some of these jobs on our volunteer boards and commissions, it can be an ordeal just to find people who are willing to serve if asked. And yes, I've heard that there are plenty of people who say they would be willing to run. I don't know if they're qualified other than on paper. I don't know that they're not, but I don't know that they are. And frankly, like I said, qualified on paper is not a guarantee that someone is qualified in fact. I don't disagree that the gentleman who was here and left is almost certainly qualified. I don't know him personally, but I have no reason to think otherwise. However, I've seen situations in other places, not in this city, where you end up with a situation where the people who are making these big important decisions are whoever happened to show up, because you need, say, 3 members and 2 people show up and then you go hunting for a 3rd person. And that doesn't guarantee that we get the most qualified people. There was a reference made to juries, and I agree, juries decide very important and weighty questions, but they're only asked to decide questions of fact. Questions of, did this happen or did that happen? Who do you believe? Juries are not tasked with deciding policy. Juries are not tasked with deciding what the law is or should be, but only how it applies to the case in front of them. And that is a judgment that requires no special expertise in many cases. There are exceptions. But if you want to know, is it more probable that this happened than that happened, that's a judgment that everyone has equal faculties to make. However, if we had an elected Board of Health, especially during this past pandemic, I can very well imagine that there would be elections where a candidate runs on the platform of, if elected, I won't make you wear a mask. That is not, I'm not saying it's about masks, but it is one issue that was brought up. It could be, if elected, I will open the schools again. If elected, I will, rescind social distancing policies in public buildings. Regardless of what the issue is, there is a risk that a candidate would run on a single issue and persuade people that they are the qualified candidate because they agree with that person's assessment of what ought to be done. And as Councillor Cruz said, issues of health and medicine shouldn't be democratic. A virus doesn't care whether a majority of people believe it can be spread a certain way or not. A bacterium doesn't care whether a majority of people believe that a certain sanitization method will kill it or not. It is not an issue that is subject to. If there's another outburst, I'm going to have to ask people to start leaving. Now, I understand the desire to have more say in the Board of Health. And if we could find a way to do so that is not prohibitively difficult, then I could support some lesser safeguards that were mentioned by my colleagues, for instance, term limits or some manner of recall vote or something. But the idea of actually electing them just doesn't make sense to me, because the quality that we are looking for in a member of the Board of Health is not how well they reflect the opinions of the majority of non-physicians in the community. I'm an attorney. I'm not a physician. I'm not going to tell a doctor that they are qualified or not qualified because I believe that what they're telling me is incorrect. And I would expect that the doctor would not come to me and say, well, I went on the internet and researched my legal issue and what you're telling me is wrong, because he didn't go to law school. So we need members of the Board of Health who have not only paper qualifications and the willingness to run, but who can be vetted through all sorts of other channels. Contact former employers, contact, other physicians who've worked with them. Those are all things that, think about it. You've got a physician who was supervising another physician who's now running for the Board of Health. Are they going to take 500 calls from residents saying, hey, I want to know what the deal is with this person? Of course they're not. They're private individuals. They have no obligation to do that. But if they get a call saying, hi, this person's up for appointment and I'd just like to know what you think of their qualifications, they're probably going to take the 5 or 10 minutes to chit-chat about it. Again, not because we're special and anyone else isn't, but because people respond to positions. It's reality. It's the reality of the world. So, personally, I'm not in favor of this going any further. I don't think that it has merit in its current form. However, as I said, I'd be open to other ideas on the same topic. That being said, I just want to highlight what the process forward would be. If we chose to take this forward, there is nothing the council can do to make this a reality. All we could do is vote that we think it's a good idea, and then someone, doesn't matter who actually, but someone would have to collect signatures equal to 15% of registered voters in the city of Fitchburg in order to establish a charter commission under Section 5 of Chapter 43B. And then from there's an additional process that I haven't even looked into because that's a very high hurdle to cross first. But you would have to get to that point. 15% of all registered voters. Now, this is not a fact that I am proud of in any way. In fact, I think it's ridiculous. But 15% of all registered voters is higher than our typical election turnout. So I honestly don't see that happening. It is not something that I like. I wish we had a turnout of 75%, 90%. But as it stands, I think 15% signatures might as well be 1 million. But again, that's what would have to happen, regardless of whether the council approves it or not. That, I will note, that can happen with or without council approval. It just needs to be a petition signed by 15% to establish a charter commission. The other option would be for the state to take action, which, again, is not a thing that this council can cause to happen. With that said, any further? What do we need to do for that? Ma'am, we are not taking further public comment. That being said, it would be the same as any other state action. You would need to contact your legislature. There is no particular formal process at the city level for that to happen. Ma'am, thank you for raising your hand, but we still are not actually taking public comment. That said, since that's being honored in the breach more than in the observance, go ahead. What would you like to ask?
I just wanted to take 10 seconds of your time and ask. Councilor Cruz mentioned that there are safeguards that guarantee that the Board of Health goes through some process. We believe that there is a major conflict of interest right now, and it has not been addressed. So will you be able to help us have a transparency in that aspect and figure out whether there is conflict of interest or not?
So that is something we're not going to talk about tonight beyond a brief response because it involves a particular individual, and we're not going to talk about that individual and allegations that have been made with that person not present. That being said, I think that it is already being looked into by the solicitor's office. There is no further formal process beyond that at the city level. Any formal complaints would need to be made to the state ethics office, I believe, though I have not researched it myself. The only process at the city level would be if the mayor, in consultation with the solicitor, were to determine that he believes a person should be removed from any appointed position. Then he could ask the council by majority vote, I believe it's majority, it might be a 2/3 majority, to permit him to remove that person. That's all there is really to say on the matter right now, but I would be happy to talk with you privately about it afterwards if you'd like. So, Councilor Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say a couple more things. I understand it's not just about masks. I think that's a part of it, but I know that there's other issues now, and I'd be happy to talk to you after as well and find out more about your thoughts on it. And I don't think the voters and the people in this community can make the right decisions. That's not why I don't think that this should go through. And the idea that no one would come forward, I think, is false as well. I think people would come forward. I think you're right about that. I am concerned, though. We already have like 25 to 30% of down ballots are left blank as it is, and this would be a down ballot. It would be much like a question. So that's concerning for me too. And I do want to go on record. I'm disappointed the Board of Health is not here to talk tonight. They should have come. Having said that, I just can't wrap my head around public health being politicized. I can't. It's got to be based on science and organizations like the CDC and the World Health Organization, and that's who the Board of Health takes their leave from. Not their leave. They take their instruction from. That's why I yield the floor.
I move that this petition be given leave to withdraw.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second. Is there any comment on the motion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 In opposition? One in opposition. Motion passes 3-1. That concludes our agenda for this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and second to adjourn. There being no objection,